Now, while all of this economic disaster is going on with the Great Depression, and actually even before the economic disasters of the Great Depression, we're starting to change some places substantially politically. Now, some of this is going to be because of the fallout of World War One. Some of this is going to be because of the economic problems of World War One that is just going to really hit its stride because of the Great Depression. But in essence here, democratic political ideals are going to come under attack in the wake of World War One. One, there is the massive challenge of communism, which we'll deal with next chapter, but kind of understand that communism is going to start to become a real legitimate threat to the Western world in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution in 1917. So, because of this, in the 1920s and 1930s, authoritarian nationalist anti communist regimes are going to be a more immediate problem to the victors of World War One. I mean, they're able again to play off of this, anti-communist rhetoric or this anti-communist fear, as well as the economic problems that are there or on the horizon with the Great Depression, in order to solidify their power and gain authority. In fact, the authoritarian states of Italy, Germany, and Japan are going to ally with each other by 1936 to 1937. What we're starting to see here in the aftermath of World War One is a fascist alternative in Europe. Now, granted, we're going to see it clearly take power in Germany, in Italy, and also in Spain. But reality is that there's fascist political parties or fascist leaning parties kind of throughout the place. We see them in France, we'll see them in England, we'll even see them within the United States. So those ideas aren't necessarily unique. What's going to be unique is the fact that in these places, it's going to take power. At this point, we have a new political ideology known as fascism that's going to become important in much of Europe. Um, and in a lot of ways, you want to put this note here down next to number one, or is capital A. You want to put, please, that this will be an answer, and put answer in quotes. This will be an answer to communism. They really, especially in the early days of their political ideology, they really play off that they are an alternative to communism, that they are actually there to minimize the threat, if not get rid of the threat of, a communist world revolution or, communism coming to a neighborhood near you. But some of the key characteristics of fascism is that they are intensely nationalistic. They look to charismatic leadership. In fact, you want to put down here next to C underneath number one that they go for a cult of personality. They go for a cult of personality. I mean, there ends up being a personality cult with all of the fascist leaders, whether it's Mussolini in Italy, Hitler in Germany, or Franco in Spain. Even the Japanese fascists are going to create a cult of the emperor. So, again, a really kind of common characteristic here. They also are against individualism, liberalism, feminism, parliamentary democracy, and communism. One of the reasons why they're against this, and you want to put this down here next to D, still underneath capital A, you want to put down that they saw them or they saw these as divisive. They see individualism, liberalism, feminism, all these different things as being something that divides the population, not unites the population. That rather than having one, common cause, you kind of have these different causes within the population. Their idea is to try to get rid of those. They also are conservative and reactionary, and they celebrate very traditional values. Now, fascism, of course, is going to appeal to dissatisfied people from all social classes. You're going to see the very, very wealthy, you're going to see the very poor, and everybody in between gravitating towards fascism throughout Europe. Again, not just simply in Italy, Germany, and then also Spain. Fascist movements are going to grow thanks to the devastation of World War One. In fact, the real foundation of fascism is going to be with the World War I veterans. Like, they've seen some things, and continuing status quo obviously is just, not going to work. And like I said earlier, it's going to appear in many Western European lands. It's not just going to be in Germany, Italy, and Spain. We're going to see it. We're going to see fascist parties all over the place within Western Europe. It, however, of course, will achieve major power in political power in Germany and Italy. And actually also put down, because I don't know why this isn't mentioned, put in parentheses here next to D underneath number two, just put down and Spain. I mean, actually, Spain's fascist regime under Franco will actually last until the 1970s. So it is actually the longest of these fascist like um, regimes. It first is going to develop in Italy, where, social tensions are going to be exacerbated by economic crisis. This is going to be immediately after World War One. I mean, so you have a lot of issues going on, and fascism is going to seem like it is a legitimate alternative. Its founder is going to be Benito Mussolini, who puts together a private army known as the Black Shirts, who, of course, are going to use violence as a political tool. Spoiler alert, Hitler's going to do the exact same thing. Although, the irony here of Mussolini, you want to put this down here next to B underneath number three. You want to put down that Mussolini had originally been a Marxist, which is on the complete and total opposite side of the political spectrum. Although his basic idea of fascism, there's going to be some weird, like, Marxist elements. It's really kind of peculiar, to say the least. Mussolini's movement is going to take the ancient Roman fasces as its symbol. So a fascist is a bundle of sticks tied together and then tied around an axe handle. And Mussolini goes and he basically is saying that with the fascis, each of those rods, each of those sticks is an individual Italian. That alone is, to a certain extent, kind of, powerless. However, if bundled all together, they can become a formidable weapon. They can become a formidable force. The one thing you have to understand about fascism and Nazism is that there's going to be a lot of symbolism, that's going to be embedded within those ideologies. And of course, like any good dictator, once in power, Mussolini is going to build uh, state power. Now, with Hitler and the Nazis, there's going to be some parallels between what he does and what Mussolini does, at least some of the first steps. And then, Hitler just simply goes pro with it, where, Mussolini sort of kind of, in some cases, seems like he's minor league. Hitler becomes, like major league. Because of this, German fascism is going to be more important than that of Italy. Of course, the party is going to take shape under Adolf Hitler. And like I said earlier, there's many similarities to Italian fascism. I won't kind of get into a lot of detail with that. But it's going to grow out of the collapse of the German imperial state after World War One. We have a new government called the Weimar Republic that negotiated peace. One of the things you have to understand that you want to put down here next to A underneath number four, you want to put down that this was an unliked republic. This was an unliked republic. And it's unlike for a bunch of different reasons. I mean, one, there's a lot of economic problems that occurred during the Republic, like the horrible inflation that I told you about the other day, in 1923, Weimar Republic. There's a lot of political turmoil under Weimar Republic. But the biggest reason why it's hated is that this Weimar Republic was the one that was forced to sign the hated Versailles Treaty. Again, they were told, look, you either sign this treaty or we're going to continue kicking the living crap out of you. And the Germans realized, okay, this treaty sucks, but it's better than continue to be pounded on until the point where we're not going to be able to negotiate our way out of anything. So this is going to be a better deal now rather than taking a craptastic deal later. But it doesn't mean that anyone likes the Versailles Treaty anymore, nor likes the Weimar Republic anymore for going ahead and signing it. There's also here during this, there's the creation of a myth that Germany had not really lost the war, but had been betrayed by civilians. And the civilians specifically are going to be socialists, communists, and Jews. And there's a specific name for this theory. You want to put down here next to C underneath number 4. Do you want to put down, and this goes in quotes, put down this is the stab in the back. This is the stab in the back. And put the stab in the back in quotes. It's actually, in German, it's a Dolchstoß. And what they argue is that the German army actually didn't lose the war. And there is a little bit of truth in the fact that at the end of the war, the German army still technically maintained foreign territory. And the supporters of this conspiracy theory basically said, okay, the German army, they weren't losing, they still held foreign territory, but they were screwed over by these traitors at home. These socialists, these communists, and Jews that hosed over the German war effort and forced the signing of this horrible treaty. In the 1920s, we have these vigilante groups known as the Freikorps that are going to assassinate hundreds of supporters of the Weimar government. Eventually, here, you want to put down here next to D, underneath number 4, you want to put down that gradually they won support from the middle class and landowners because they claimed to protect private property. So the Nazis in Germany, just like the fascists in Italy, are actually going to set themselves up as the alternative or the protectors against communism. What also is going to kind of fan the flames here is the widespread economic suffering that occurs, the massive inflation in 1923, like I told you about, and then also the Great Depression. The way the Nazis use this, and you want to put this down here next to number 3, you want to put, please, that the Nazis used both as propaganda tools. The Nazis used both as propaganda tools. Actually, during the Great Depression, the Nazis will set up soup kitchens and they'll, like, feed everybody that comes in. But as you're sitting there with your meal, you have to listen to some Nazi propaganda as well. They also offer themselves as a solution to not only communists, but also this middle of the road government of the Weimar Republic that doesn't seem to be getting a whole heck of a lot done. So again, they really use this to their advantage. Eventually, here, the National Socialist or the Nazi Party is going to win growing public support. Eventually, the Nazis are in 1928 are only going to start out with 2.6% of the vote in 1928. However, by 1932, because we're in the throes of the Depression, it's going to grow to 37%. You do want to put down here next to 5. Do you want to put, please, here that Hitler became chancellor in 1933? This was an attempt to limit him. What they really kind of thought here is because he's such a rabble rouser. I mean, he attempts to overthrow the government in a beer hall putsch in 1923. They really think that, okay, look, if we put him in some type of position of power, we're going to be able to grind him down and limit his rabble rousing because he's just going to be so overwhelmed by the actual workings of running the government. It doesn't work, but it was at least an attempt to kind of get him to kind of chill a little bit. As chancellor, Hitler is going to suppress all other political parties, arrest opponents, censor the press, and also assume political power. By the way, you want to put down here next to number 6, do you want to put, please, here that Mussolini did the same thing? Mussolini did the same thing. Again, like I told you earlier, German Nazism is going to be a riff off of Italian fascism, at least at the beginning. What Hitler does successfully is to bring Germany out of the Great Depression. And one of the ways that he's able to do this, you want to put this down here next to A underneath number 6. Do you want to put that he had similar policies to the New Deal? He had similar policies to the New Deal. So what he's basically doing is that he's creating these massive public works projects. And this is everything from building the Olympic Stadium for the Berlin Olympics to even building the Autobahn, as well as other major projects. And also, excuse me, eventually when it comes to it, the building up of arms prior to World War One. By the late 1930s, the Nazis are going to have majority support. I mean, at this point, they're really, they're just going to simply go ahead and take over. And they're going to use the Jews as the ultimate scapegoat for the ills of society. You want to put down here, there's 2 things we need to put down here next to number 7. And these are 2 of the high points prior to the Holocaust of anti-Jewish legislation here in Nazi Germany. You want to put down the Nuremberg laws, Nuremberg laws. And I just want to define it for you. These forbid racial mixing of Jews and Germans. And the Jews had to wear the Star of David. Now, this identifying the Jews based upon some symbol is not new. There had been other places in going back even to the Middle Ages where Jews had identified themselves either A, by wearing the Star of David, or they had to wear a specific colored circle marker on the outside of their jackets, or there was a specific type of hat that they needed to wear in order to be identified as Jews. The other thing here I want you to put down next to number 7, and this is something, again, you probably have heard of. It's Kristallnacht. It's Kristallnacht. And of course, it translates to Night of Broken Glass. But what I want you to put down here for Kristallnacht is its massive destruction and looting of Jewish-owned shops. Even while this is going on and afterwards, the Jews, of course, are going to increasingly be excluded from public life. Anti-Semitism is not going to be something that is new for Europe. In fact, it's not going to be anything that's unique with Germany. Anti-Semitism is a massive, blot on the Europeans at this point. The Germans are just doing a lot more right now to categorize it, and of course, then they just take it to absolutely horrific levels with a final solution. The Nazis, of course, just like the Italian fascists, are going to be deeply anti-feminist, again, because they're upholders of tradition. They don't like the ideas of modern feminism. And the rise of Nazism in general is also going to represent the moral collapse within the West, where these guys are highly selective of the use of earlier strands of European culture, and they're also going to make use, and I use the term loosely, of modern science. You know what I put down here next to B, underneath number 9? that science was later used to justify the Holocaust. Science was later used to justify the Holocaust. Now, with the buildup of fascism, or sort of kind of like fascism in Japan, there are going to be some parallels, but of course, there are also going to be, some really big differences here. One of the new things is that Japan is a newcomer to great power status. Remember, they only just created their empire towards the end of the last century. They only kind of became that, modern power status relatively recently. But like Germany and Italy, they also moved to an authoritarian government and territorial expansion. So again, same, basic things. However, there are some important differences. And you want to, because there's some important differences, you want to put a star here next to number 3. One is Japan played only a minimal role in World War One. So the fallout of World War One is not going to be a major cause for the buildup of fascism. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Japanese are not real happy with how World War ended for them. They really thought that they were entitled to some more spoils of the war, like I told you before. They really thought that they should get the Pacific Islands that Germany had as colonies. And when England and also I think France gets them instead, these guys start to scream like European racism and that type of stuff. So there is a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth. But World War One is not going to be like it was in Germany or Italy, a major pusher to these fascist ideas. In the 1920s, Japan was apparently moving towards democracy. We see an expansion of education. There's greater individual freedoms, even including for women, which, if you remember last chapter, was like a sticking point of modernization. There's also a lower class movement that's working for greater equality. So all signs are pointing to democracy, not towards authoritarianism. However, we have some tensions of modernization and industrialization start to emerge. Honestly, some kind of simmering things that were in last chapter with that rush towards westernization, it's kind of coming to a head a little bit here. Where we have union membership tripling in the 1920s, we have a women's movement demanding suffrage and the end of legalized prostitution. We also have socialist and communist political parties starting to take shape. So we got some worries going on. In fact, the elites are going to start to react with alarm. The big thing that's happening here, and you want to put down here next to number 6, do you want to put, please, here that there is the peace preservation law, and then put in parentheses 1925, so you know when the peace preservation law was created. And then continue with a note. This means prison or death for anyone who organizes against the imperial government or private property. So all of a sudden, with this peace preservation law, we take a hard right turn away from democracy and more towards authoritarianism. And you're going to kind of see here over the next couple years, we're just going to end up, keeping this up. Um, as a consequence of this, political activists are going to be arrested, and a few are going to be killed. Like I kind of told you before, the Great Depression is going to hit Japan hard because, of course, Japan is dependent upon international trade. You want to put down here next to number 7 that the economy becomes shaky as international trade vanishes. Again, like I said in the previous section, the Great Depression is going to be hardest felt in those places that are dependent upon trade. And Japan is definitely dependent upon trade. Because of this, This is going to lead a lot of people to doubt that parliamentary democracy and capitalism could help to resolve this national emergency because they're not doing anything, or at least they don't appear to be doing anything or fixing the solution. So maybe we have to find an alternative. So, what we end up getting is the development of a radical nationalism or a revolutionary right. What this is, and you want to put this down here next to B underneath number 7, you want to put down extreme nationalism and hostility to parliamentary democracy. We're going to build upon this and we're going to see a shift in Japanese public life in the 1930s, where the major government posts are going to go to prominent bureaucrats or military figures, not party leaders. Now, this is going to be a massive difference between what goes on in Japan and what goes on in Italy and Germany. So you want to put down here next to A underneath 8, you want to put down here that no right wing party gained wide support or produced a charismatic leader, though they do create a cult of the emperor. So, in other words, we don't have a fascist party becoming the dominant political party in Japan in the same way that we do within Germany and Italy. We don't have in Japan, we don't really have a figure like Hitler or Mussolini, or if we want to even go to Spain, we don't have a figure like, like Franco. What does happen is that the military does become more dominant, and you see that in the other fascist places as well. And free expression is also increasingly limited. However, another big exception here, and you want to put a star by number 9, is that Japan was less repressive than in Italy or Germany. It's not going to be as over the top as the fascist powers within Italy or Germany or even Spain, to be quite honest with you.